Greg, let's talk about at least within church, the homeschool, public school type of debate. How should Christians walk through discernment in the case of, hey, I want my kids to get a really good education, a Christian-like education. Should I send them to public school? Should I homeschool them? What's your advice?
Well, the first thing that parents should do is make sure they take a hard, real look at the responsibility of God, of what God calls parents to, which is to bring their kids up in the teaching and discipline of the Lord. So He calls Christian parents to be the primary disciplers, educators, same thing. Mm-hmm. There's not, I think we think education and we think about public schools or just a classroom setting. Mm-hmm. But what's actually happening there is there is a teaching and discipline that's happening in any case, education-wise. Yeah. So when you take your kids, let's say you put them in the public schools and they go for 6 to 8 hours a day, we think they're just getting math and science and they're just getting some subjects. Yeah. What's actually happening is they are being discipled. Okay, yeah. So behind everything is a worldview, so I think Christian parents need to consider the realities of what's actually happening and be wise about it. That no education is neutral. And so they've got to think and navigate, okay, well how are we as a family going to tackle education as a family? So, yeah, you're saying, look, the options are you got homeschooling, you got private school, and you've got public school.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah? How do you work through this? Well, the first thing I would say is, you got to take responsibility for it. Mm-hmm. And so if you're deciding as a family, hey, we're going to do public school. Well, okay, but now you've got to decide what are you going to do to counter it, right? Yeah. What are you going to do to retrain when they come home and they've been taught that we evolved from monkeys, right?
Yeah, came from fish. Right?
Hey, yeah, right. So, we're looking at Genesis today. God created the world, and meanwhile they're going off to the science class and never hearing about God, and hearing about natural processes creating everything that we see. Are you prepared to engage that? When they go and talk about history, and there's no mention of the church, there's no mention of the sovereign God working in history through the church, are you prepared to teach them otherwise? And so that's just the challenge that comes with public education. Yeah. That's only one side of it, because the other side is whoever the teachers are, they are discipling your children. Yeah. What they value is going to come out. I can remember being in high school and teachers would, let you see certain things you shouldn't be seeing, or they talk about things you shouldn't be talking about. I don't think my parents would want teachers engaging me in that conversation. Yeah. That's how even the sexual classes, sexual teaching classes and stuff, special education classes and stuff like that. You got a whole gamut of education that people, the public schools are teaching, that really should be the parents' job. Yeah. And so Christian parents have given that over, and they shouldn't have many years ago. And now we're starting to rethink it. And a lot of people are saying, look, we'll homeschool our kids because our values don't line up. Yeah. If you're thinking in the future, one of the things you want to look at is all the transgenderism type of stuff, right. The homosexual agenda, the liberal agenda. That's been in the schools now for a long time. So that's going to come into the classrooms hard, and so you're going to have to just be prepared to counter that. I don't think many Christian parents that are just kind of, they're not in a special circumstance, right? They're in a circumstance where they are willfully saying, I'm going to put my kids there. Yeah. They are not thinking about this like they should. Yeah. There are some who, they can't help it. That's the situation they're in. And by God's grace, they need to trust Him and do the best at discipling their kids. For whatever reason, there is no other option for them. But if you're within the family, let's say, and you're a father and you say, I want my kids to be homeschooled, and the mother says, well, I'm not doing it, right? What do you do then, right?
I mean, what if you have a family that the mother and the father are both working? Obviously the public school day is 7-8 hours. A working day, what about those type of situations also?
Well, you need, obviously, it's case-by-case type of thing. Sure. But one of the things that the family should think through is there a way to cut back on their living expenses, cut back on the type of lifestyle they're living in order to put the kid in a private school? Yeah. If not, check out the local school and ask yourself, how can I get involved and unfortunately, you're going to come into some conflict.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to be willing as a Christian to fight that and say, look, we're just going to have to engage and teach your kids. I mean, my son is 12. He's been homeschooled. I think by the time he gets in high school, if I dropped him off at the high school, he'd get in fights, not physical fights, but arguments constantly to battle ideas because he's being raised differently to think about ideas and things like that. So I don't think it's terrible that the Christians might go into the public school and because they have to, but they're equipped to engage the secular education theory and all that, which is nonsense. But honestly, I think Christians should start to recognize that the secular education system is not neutral. That's the big thing. So like when let's say a superintendent or the Department of Education says we're going to be neutral on things about God, which is what secularism said.
Sure.
That's not a neutral position.
No.
So if the God of the heavens says everything is to glorify me, and someone comes along and says we're gonna teach you about the world, but we're going to exclude him. We're going to be neutral about him, but we're going to exclude him. Well, that's not a neutral position. You just said he can't be here.
Yeah.
Well, you don't have the right to say that. You're actually now becoming a god yourself and saying we're excluding the other gods. No Allah, no Yahweh, no triune God. And we're pushing these gods out, and now we're in control of the education, how history happened, how science happened. So I think that went over everybody's head, 80, 90 years ago when the education system was being pushed on and making everybody do public education. Okay. So I think that Christian parents should realize this is an essential conversation to have. Okay. And they need to think about their options. And if they do something like homeschooling, they need to really think about what is a philosophy of education, what's the purpose of our education, and it needs to be to glorify God in every subject. That you're educating the person, the child, to be a well-educated person for the glory of God, not to get more information or to be smarter, but that they would understand the world that God has made, understand how to live faithfully in that world, and to love the world that he made. Yeah. Like he loves science, he loves math, it glorifies him, he loves history, he loves philosophy, he loves theology. And we need to give children a love for these things. Well, they got to learn to read, they got to learn to count, they got to learn to do all these things in order to do that. And so Christians need to do these things well and push their children towards loving God with their mind, their heart, and their soul in something like education.
So one thing that, at least with me and my wife, we're thinking about homeschooling our kids, and we kind of got a lot of conflict with that, and I'm sure a lot of other parents have also. How can a Christian couple deal with the conflict of, well, hey, your kid's not going to get enough attention, you never taught before,
right.
They're not going to be around other kids, they're not going to learn how to be like a kid. What would you say to that?
Yeah, well, there's a couple things. One, at least hopefully for the first 7 grades, 8 grades, you already know that stuff, right? Yeah. I mean, you know how to read a kid's book. You know how to count basic mathematics. Yeah. So a parent should feel the freedom, like, I can teach my kids things that are common, right? You might not be able to teach chemistry, but you don't have to in kindergarten. And when you get to that stage, like high school, technology today is wonderful. There's a lot of online classes. There's a lot of online stuff. And so the availability for homeschooling parents to give quality education to their children in high school level stuff is amazing today, and it's only going to get better in the next decade and more. Yeah. So that's the thing. Parents shouldn't be worried about whether they could teach their children the things that they need to learn. We went through that. We homeschooled all of our children. We went through the same thing, and you'd be amazed at your abilities to teach children and learn. And there's a lot of great resources. They shouldn't fear that. And when outside people in the family kind of push against it and say, well, you don't know what you're talking about, you just have to be faithful. You got to stand and be strong. One of the other ones that you mentioned about, like, people say, well, your kids are not getting social, the social interaction with the kids, right? I always respond, how's it going for public schools, right? How's it going for public school kids? Yeah. We've got tons of, what's the problems today for the people between the ages of 20 and 30? Right? They don't do relationships well. A lot of the boys are still at home. They love trivial things. They can't, the things that mature people in life, like getting married, having children, getting a secure job, they're struggling at all those things, right? Yeah. And what you see in the public schools is this like, but they're getting plenty of social interaction. Yeah, but how's it going afterwards, right? Percentagely, I'd say the statistics are worse. They're having a much harder time figuring out life. But the other thing is, and we found this with our kids, we were worried about that. You know, there are some homeschooling families out there, and the kids are a little weird.
Sure, yeah.
But there are most of them that we found. There's a good homeschooling community in the Tri-Cities, and they're just normal people. They're everyday Christians, some non-Christians, that are just trying to teach their children. You know, they want to educate their children, and their children are normal kids. They're just kids. So unless you're kind of the legalistic homeschooling family that puts all these pressures and things on their kids, you're not going to destroy your kids. They're going to be kids. Yeah. And so those fears and things like that, those aren't true. And when it comes to working with other family members who might not like, you know, what you're doing, they may have some pressure there. You know, I just say that you just show them over time. Just be faithful to it. They'll see the results. They'll see what the children are capable of. And honestly, homeschooling parents would be amazed. Homeschooling parents, people that are thinking about homeschooling, you'll be amazed at what your kids are capable of. Yeah. So when you look at the public education, just real quick, when you look at the public education, one of the things they have to do is they're egalitarian, means they make everything the same. And so that means the smart kid in the class and the dumb kid in the class are seen as if they're the exact same.
Sure, yeah.
And so one kid can't do math, but he can do English, and one kid can't do English, but he can do math. Yeah. And then they're called to the same standard. Well, naturally what happens is everything gets lowered. And so you stifle certain kids in other areas, and you make it boring for other kids because they're like, man, I could have done this 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. So like my oldest son, he was reading at a high school post-college level in 6th grade. Well, if he was in a class that was making him read stupid little books when he's capable of reading Harry Potter, but he's in 5th grade and he's reading, the Caterpillar book or something dumb, he's going to hate learning. Yeah. And the public school has no ability to take children, because of their philosophy, they have no ability to take children as they are and develop them as God made them, because they don't believe they were made different. This is whole science. They think they're just products of evolution. So everybody's with the same capability. That's nonsense. God made people gifted in different ways. He made them different in certain ways. We should celebrate it, enhance those things, teach them to do those things well that God has made them, and celebrate them. But public schools' inability to do that is because of standardized testing. They have to take the standards down to pass them. The pressure on teachers is ridiculous. I feel for public school teachers. I think it's probably one of the hardest jobs, because you're being called to replace the parents, and really all you want to do is try to teach them math, right? And they're calling you to fix my kid. You can't fix your kid. That's the parent's job. But the school system has taken on that responsibility, so they put that pressure on the on the teachers to do it. And it's just not a good environment for children, because the children get lost in this whole process, as far as really educating them and helping them.
So what would be some resources that you could give to these parents that really want to look at more into homeschool?
Yeah, a couple. One, I would read stuff on classical education by Douglas Wilson. Phenomenal. The Paideia of God is one of them. Classic Christian Education in the Homeschool is another one. These are shorter books, but they're really helpful. I'd also read The Well-Trained Mind by, I think it's Susan Wise Bauer does that one. And there's some other ones. Once you start down that path, you'll start connecting with some other books out there that are really helpful. And mostly it'll be to train you to think about education in general. That's the first step. The best thing if you're really going to do it, you're thinking about curriculum and actually getting into the teaching, go find a local homeschooling group or look online and just read and learn from others. What did they do? Figure out what you want to do as you're thinking about your children and what's going to be good for them and your schedules and things like that, and then try to put it in place. But it's a ton of resources out there now.
Hey guys, thanks for checking out our YouTube page. We're Christ Fellowship Church, and we create these videos so we can equip Christians and non-Christians about the truths of Christianity. Jesus is Lord, so every question concerns him. So send us your questions to our Facebook page or the email address at the bottom of the screen. We'll make a response video, post it, and then send you the link when we're done. So make sure you subscribe to our YouTube page and like us on Facebook. Thanks, guys.